I know I can't be the only Detroit Lions fan disappointed by the game on Sunday. Yes, the Detroit Lions won. Yes, the Detroit Lions, they even covered the spread, winning by 16 points, nearly 3 possessions worth of football. And yet somehow, some way, despite being 4-1, despite going on the road to a 500 AFC team that, hasn't been playing great football, but still has talent on both sides of the football and winning by double digits, this game didn't feel like a victory. It felt like there was a lot left on the bone. It felt like there was a lot left to be desired. And again, I'm sure I'm not the only Detroit Lions fan to feel that way. Now, the Detroit Lions beat the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 5 by a score of 37-24. The Detroit Lions dominated 3/4 of this football game. They marched right down the field in their first drive to score. They got their first opening drive stop of the season, preventing Cincinnati from scoring on their opening offensive drive. They marched right back down and they scored another touchdown with a trick play throwing touchdown from David Montgomery to Brock Wright. They were playing very well in this game. They didn't allow a defensive point until time expired in the first half, and as the half was coming to a close, the Bengals would kick a field goal to trail just 14-3 going into the second half. The Lions came out, they scored 21, they scored 28. This game going into the fourth quarter felt like an easy victory for Detroit, and then the fourth quarter came around, and the Cincinnati Bengals scored. Okay, no big deal. It was 28-10, pretty easy. And then the Bengals scored again, a 64-yard passing touchdown to Jamar Chase, and all of a sudden, that's 28-17. Yes, it's still an 11-point game, but things are feeling a little bit dicey. And the Detroit Lions would score again. They'd put up 35. Cincinnati would go to 24. And then, of course, the Detroit Lions would end the scoring with a safety, putting them up 16 points. Again, covering the spread by 10.5, covering, obviously winning the football game pretty handedly. But that final stretch really felt like a disappointment. And there were some big reasons for that. Obviously, the injuries coming about. The Lions allowed just 3 points when Terrion Arnold was on the field through 3 quarters. And when Terrion Arnold left the field, they allowed 24 points, most of which came from the passing game. Jake Browning finished with 3 passing touchdowns despite really playing a very, very poor game for the Cincinnati Bengals through 3 quarters and about 5 minutes into the fourth. And I do think Terrion Arnold was a big part of that. Obviously, Avonte Maddox came in and he got beat a couple times. Rocky Singh got beat a couple times. Even Amik Robertson, who came with an interception, got beat a couple of times. And it just felt like there was so much more left to be desired. There was so much left for the offense to do. There was so much left for the defense to prove that there were really disappointing moments there in that second half, and really in that fourth quarter in particular, even when there really shouldn't have felt like that, right? Taking a look at some of the box scores, Jared Goff was quite good. Jared Goff was 19 of 23, 258 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He did get sacked 4 times. Giovanni Manu had a rough time against the all-pro pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson, but that was really the big reason the offense didn't feel as important and as productive as it has been, is because Jared Goff got sacked. Jared Goff got hit, he went down, he fumbled the football, but none of that was really his fault when it came down to the end of the day, right? Jared Goff played a good game, he played a clean game, he had just 4 completions across 4 quarters and nearly had as many passing touchdowns as he had incompletions in the game. The rushing attack wasn't great, but it was serviceable. David Montgomery had 18 carries for 65 yards, a touchdown on the ground, and a touchdown through the air. Jahmyr Gibbs had 12 carries for 54 yards, 4.5 yards per carry, but did not find the end zone. And then, well, at least not through the ground, he found one through the air. Passing-wise, the Lions were really good. Amon-Ra had 100 yards through the air. Laporta had 92 and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs had 33 and a touchdown. Isaac Tesla had 12 and a touchdown. Brock Wright had 9 and a touchdown. Jameson Williams had 1 for 9, but again, his role just was a single target that day. It wasn't a big role for him. And defensively, Jack Campbell had 11 tackles and a TFL. He played very well. Derek Barnes had 5 tackles and a sack. Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks, one of which was wiped off the board. Al-Qaeda Muhammad was close a couple times to the quarterback. We had a couple forced fumbles, a couple of interceptions. Alex Anzalone had an interception. Amik Robertson had an interception. Kirby Joseph had a takeaway. And I believe Jack Campbell actually forced a fumble as well, although the Detroit Lions did not recover it. They forced turnovers. They forced just 3 points through 3 quarters of football. And overall, the defense looked really, really good. But it was that last little bit. It was when Khalif Raymond got injured, the special teams did not play very well. It was when, a guy like Terrion Arnold left the game. The defense did not play very well. The secondary got significantly worse when Terrion Arnold left the field. And that, I think, is a major concern going into Kansas City, because they're not going to have DJ Reed. They're not going to have, some of their elite cornerbacks. So if they go in without Terrion Arnold, yeah, Meek Robertson's fine. Yeah, Rocky Sin played fine. Yeah, Avonte Maddox is serviceable. But none of those players are really great cornerbacks. And that's a big concern going into next week. Taking a look at some of the team stats, the Detroit Lions won in first downs. The Detroit Lions were more efficient technically on third down, although they were only just 2 for 8 on the day for it. They had 365 yards total, which was better than the Cincinnati 322. They ran more plays. They had the same amount of total drives. They passed better. They ran better. They did actually have more penalties, which was concerning. And I think that's a big reason why as well this game felt disappointing, because we go back and trying to stay positive. Yes, this team through 3 quarters of football was dominating. There was a point where they were up 28-3 and it felt like they could do no wrong. It felt like every time the ball was in the air, there was a chance it was a Detroit Lions football. It felt like every time Jake Browning went back to pass, there was a chance Aiden Hutchinson was going to get home. There was a chance that somebody was going to get to the quarterback. And I think that fourth quarter really, especially due to injuries and especially due to kind of letting their foot off the gas, they let Cincinnati back into that game, which is concerning. That's exactly how the 49ers came back in the NFC Championship game. This is exactly how some of these games have fallen away from the Detroit Lions in the past. And although it's a very rare occurrence, it wasn't a good thing for the Detroit Lions to give up that many points in the fourth. 21 points in the fourth quarter is awful. That is atrocious. The offense wasn't moving. The offense turned the football over. The defense couldn't get a stop until the very end in that safety. It wasn't a good football game in the fourth quarter for Detroit. Luckily, they were up by 28. It didn't matter in the end that they scored 17-24 in the second half, but it wasn't a good day for Detroit. So with that being said, I still think Detroit is very good, right? The offense is still playing quite well. When Taylor Decker gets back, the offensive woes should cease. I think Giovanni Manu definitely struggled, and that is a video for later in the week when we have more time to do a film review. But Giovanni Manu struggled, and that was why the offense struggled. The defense had injuries, and that's why the defense struggled. But those defensive injuries aren't going to get better going into Kansas City. They might get part of a Lee McNeil back. They might get a guy like Terrion Arnold back, but is that going to be enough to kind of rein in what the Kansas City Chiefs have had? So with that being said, I think a disappointing victory, but a victory nonetheless. You want the Detroit Lions to finish much stronger, but at the end of the day, they are 4-1. At the end of the day, they won by 16 points. And several years ago, that would have been enough for any Detroit Lions fan. Regardless of how they finished, regardless of what happened at the end of that game, the Detroit Lions won by double digits. The Detroit Lions won very convincingly. They won very handedly in the box score. And there are things to clean up, as there always are, but at the end of the day, the Detroit Lions played a good football game. At the end of the day, the Detroit Lions for 3.5 quarters played a nearly perfect football game. And although we can pick it and we can, nitpick and we can kind of wade through there were so many things to clean up, there were so many ways the Lions could have improved, at the end of the day, they're 4-1. At the end of the day, they've won their last 3 games by 8 points or more. And at the end of the day, the Lions are one of the best teams in football. They've won 3 of their 4 games by double digits, and they are a dominating force in the NFL. And that, for me, at least for today, is enough. So with that being said, appreciate the win, appreciate Victory Monday. It is always a good day when they do that. Tigers are winning. I know they lost last night, but they're tied in the series in the second round of the playoffs, so that's good. Detroit sports are back. Detroit sports are playing well. The Lions are off to a good start this season. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Obviously, we do Detroit Lions content here every single day. So if you want Detroit Lions updates, you want takeaways, you want breakdowns, you want player evaluations, stay here on Right or Wrong for all of that. Hit subscribe, hit the bell notification so we can start growing once again. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!